Join me as we learn together Chumash for Wednesday, Parshas Vayikra, chapter 3, verse 1. Yesterday and the day before, we were learning about the different sacrifices that were brought, mainly about the ascent offerings, what kind of sacrifices and what kind of animals, a meal offering to the libations that were brought with it, as well as the bird offerings in the previous days. Today we come to a new type of sacrifice, which is called a peace offering. A peace offering would be a person that would bring, it was called a peace offering because it promotes peace, generally speaking, because all parties involved in the sacrifice participated in it. The altar had some, the Kohen who brought it had some, as well as the individual bringing it also participated in it, as we will see in the following verses. Chapter 3, verse 1. V'im zevach shlamim korbanai. If the sacrifice will be a peace offering, imin habakar from the cattle, umimakar if he's going to bring his offering, im zachar whether a male, im nekev or female, tamim yakrivenu, it has to be without a blemish. Yakrivenu lifnei Hashem, he has to bring it before God. Shlamim, but the reason why this was called a peace offering, as Rashi explains, shematilin shalim ba'olam, because it brings peace in the world. That means because of these sacrifices, God takes away the punishment and brings peace in the world. Davar acher, another reason why it was called a peace offering, shlamim, peace sheyesh b'm shalom lemizbech v'lakayin v'labaylim, because there was peace for the altar, for the kohanim, for the owners, the people who brought the sacrifice. Verse 2. The samach yadi al rish karbani, and then he must place his hand on the head of the sacrifice. Ushchatai, and then he will slaughter it pesach mayit at the entrance of the tent of gathering. V'zork b'nei Aaron hakayin esadam, and then the children of Aaron will then sprinkle the blood. Allah mizbeach saviv, encircling the altar. Verse 3. V'hikriv mizavach hashlamim ishal Hashem, and then he will bring from the fire offering, as a fire offering to God, mizavach hashlamim, from the peace offering as a fire offering, ishal Hashem, as a fire offering to God. What will he bring? Es hachelav ha'machas hakerev, the fat covering the innards. Ves kol hachelav asher al kerev, and all the fat that is on the innards. Rashi, es kol hachelav, all the fats. There are two kinds of fats. There's the fats which is called chelav and the fats that was called shumim. They look very similar, however, they have different purposes and different reasons. And over here, what he's telling us over here, what we know over here is which one is he bringing? Lahavi, chelav shalakeva. It's coming to include that even the fats that was on the innards, that as well, which you can know what it is because it would peel and it would be very soft. And there were two signs that the Talmud describes of what and how you can identify what is chelav and what is shumin, what is the permissible fats, and which one actually had to be brought on the altar. This is what Rabbi Yishmael says. Rabbi Akiva says the verse is coming to include lahavi, include chelav shaladakin, that the fats that was on the very two thin lines, these two signs, and the difference would be what kind of fats it's referring to over here, and if that fats had to be also brought on the altar. That means, according to Rabbi Akiva, the actual fats that was on the stomach was not brought onto the altar and was not prohibited. According to Rabbi Yishmael, the fats that's on the stomach was also included and had to be brought on the altar, and today is prohibited from eating. Verse 4. Ve'ishtei akloyes, and the two kidneys, ve'zachelav asher aleyan, and the fat that's on them, asher al aksalim, and the fat that's on the flanks around it, ve'seiseres al akavet, and then also to the extra fats that's on the diaphragm, ala kloyes, along with the kidneys, yisirena, have to be removed, and those are also placed and brought as well. Verse 4, haksalim, ksalim literally, as Rashi translates, flanken. Flanken today is what we would call the side of the stomach, the side of the animal. Hachelav shalakloyes, the fats that was on the kidneys, when the animal's alive, who begeva haksalim, it is in the same height. It looks like it's the same height as those kidneys itself. This is the fats that's underneath the hips of the animal, but when the animal's standing, it looks like it's the same height. The white that you see on the top of the head, the top of the kidneys, as well, or on the top of the wall of it, which you can see on the walls of the stomach. But when underneath, the meat is covering it completely, because when it walks, that's the place that it's open when it walks. So when the belly of the actual animal underneath, it's open, but from the top will be the same height, and that's why it's called the walls of the kidneys. Hayeseres, what does it mean extra? This is the wall, which is like the curtain, which is on the outside. It's called like the diaphragm, what we would call in English. And in Aramaic, it would be the courtyard of the liver, which is on the outside and it's protecting the liver. Al hakaved, on the liver. Sheyitul min hakaved ima me'at. You should take from the liver with it a little bit. B'mokim acher hu'emer. In another place it says v'asa yiseres min hakaved, and whatever's extra, meaning it comes together with the liver as well. Ala kaved ala kloyes yisireno. As we mentioned before, that along with the diaphragm, along with the kidneys, came with the liver. That was the last few words of the verse. So what does it mean he has to take it off? Levad, minakovid, levad, minakloyes, yisirena lazu. Besides the actual liver and besides the actual kidneys, that they have to take a little bit of extra fats that was around it, that was around the diaphragm as well. Verse 5, and Aaron's descendants must burn it on the altar after they would do the regular routine of the fire. Asher al eitzim, which is on the wood, asher al eitzim, which is on the fire, eishe reich necheach l'Hashem, which shall be a burnt offering pleased to God. What is it telling us? Al ha'etz, al ha'oila, Milvad ha'oila, besides the scent offering which was brought every single morning. Lamanu, from here we learn, shetagdim oila satami, that the first thing that was brought was the standard ola offering. L'chol karban al marach, that means on the actual offering, on the actual altar, what was brought on the wood of the altar, the first thing that had to be brought was the ascent offering. Only after the ascent offering was brought can the peace offering or any other offering be brought as well. Verse 6, but if from the sheep will be a sacrifice, l'zevach shlamim, as a peace offering l'Hashem, to God, zacher, in a cave of male or female, tamim yakrivenu, it has to be unblemished, can he bring as a sacrifice. Verse 7, im kesef u'makriv, if he's going to bring a sheep, as carbon, as a sacrifice, Vayikra Vaysay, and will then bring it Lefnei Hashem, in front of God. Im kesef, Rashi explains. What does it mean, im kesef, if it will be from a sheep? So Rashi tells us, because there are limbs that exist by the sheep that don't exist by the goat. Because by a sheep they would bring the tail, the back end of it. Therefore, you have to give a separate discussion or a separate verse to tell us about the sheep versus the goat. The samach syadi al reish karbani, he will then lean his hands on the head of the sacrifice. V'shachadei, so slaughter it lefnei made in front of the tent of meeting. V'zarku b'nei Aaron asdami, and then the children of Aaron will throw its blood al mizbeach saviv, encircling the altar. V'zarku, why does it say and they will then throw it? Around it, shtei matanish in arba, as we mentioned previously, there were two throwings of blood, but those two would encircle the entire altar, because when he would throw it at the corner, it would hit both the walls. Like Deya would throw it with a vessel. The only time that he would use his finger was by the sin offering. However, by an ola offering or by a peace offering, he would be using a vessel to throw it. Verse 9, would then bring from the peace offering each of Hashem as a sacrifice to God. He would then he must then remove the choicest part of the entire tail. Tamima of the choicest part, the alya tamima, the entire tail, lo umas ha'otza, to the part lo umas ha'otza yisirena. He will then have to remove it, removing the choicest part of that tail. Yisireni will remove and the fat covering the innards, and all the fat that is on the innards. As we mentioned in Rashi previously, that this by the sheep they would bring the tail. So from this tail you had the choicest part of the entire fatty tail, beginning all the way up at the kidneys. That's why he uses the terminology umas ha'otz. As Rashi says, chelbay. What does the word chelbay mean? Hamufchar shabay, the best part of it. Umahuzeh, what's the best part? Ha'al yatmima, by bringing the entire tail. Umas ha'otz. What does it mean? Umas ha'otz. So as we explained, this was the kidneys, towards the kidneys. This would be when right opposite, that it went all the way until the kidneys. What does it mean, yoyitzes? Because we say that the kidneys is what gives the person the advice and the idea how he should behave. Verse 10. And the two kidneys, and the fats that's on them, that's on the that is on the flanks. He must remove them as well. And then he must remove the diaphragm along with the kidneys and along with the part that is on the liver, and part of the liver. Verse 11, V'yiktiri HaKoyin has mizbecha, and the Kohen will then bring it on the altar. Lechem ishal Hashem, this will be as food for the fire to God. Lechem ishal Hashem, what does it mean? Lechem shaleish, food for the fire. L'shem gevaya, which is done for the purpose of God. Lechem, why does he call it a bread? Because Loshin Meichel, anything which is considered a food, is called a bread. Other verses that we find that any time a terminology is used as food, he will use the terminology of bread as well. Verse 12, and so too if they mention that we split it up, the sheep and the goat, because they have different parts that were brought on the altar, and now he discusses the part of the goat. If the goat is a sacrifice, Hashem will bring it as a sacrifice before God. Verse 13, and will lean his hands on it, said, and will slaughter it before the tent of meeting, and the children of Aaron will then throw its blood, encircling the altar. Verse 14, and then he will bring from it its sacrifice, Ishal Hashem, as a burnt offering for God, as a chelav and machasas hakerev, the fats that covers over the innards, the eis kol hachelav asher al hakerev, and all the fats that is on the innards as well. Verse 15, ve'eshtei hakloyis, and the two kidneys, v'sayiseres v'sachelav asher lein, and the fats that's on them, asher al haksolim, that is on the flanks, and then to remove the diaphragm along with the kidneys, and also the fats and the diaphragm that would be on the liver, and moving parts of the liver together with it as well. Verse 16, and then the Kohen will burn this all up, and the Kohen will burn this all up on the altar. This is all food for the fire as a peace offering to Hashem. All of the fats, and meaning all the sacrificial fats, belong to God. Verse 17, this will be an eternal rule for generations to come, in all the places that you live. Any fats or any blood may not be consumed. Rashi, this very fact that it tells us there will be an eternal law, this is explained very well in the Torah's Kahanim, which is the Medrash, which explains the laws pertaining the sacrificial offerings, and it explains what it means in every place, whether it's in and all wherever you live, whether it's in the land of Israel, whether outside the land of Israel. These prohibitions exist that one is not allowed to consume any blood or prohibited fats. This concludes the Torah reading for Wednesday, Parshas Vayikra.